Hi, my name is Matt Philippi, and this is a demo on how to connect Tableau to Azure SQL Data Warehouse as well as Azure Blob Storage, files in Azure Blob Storage using Polybase. You can find me on LinkedIn at CPA and Business Intelligence Architect. You can also find me on YouTube. You can search my name in the YouTube page, or I'm also at MDSS 98108, and then I also have a Tableau public page, and feel free to reach out and connect to me. So the basic architecture here is we have Tableau, and then we have Azure SQL Data Warehouse, which falls in the columnar store database family like AWS Redshift, Google BigQuery. This is the Azure Microsoft product, super cool product in the cloud, massively parallel processing. Additionally, there's a feature called Polybase, which allows you to connect to files and create tables, external storage tables in Azure Blob Store. So if you're outputting things from HD Insight or Hadoop clusters into Blob Store, you can access them via the SQL Data Warehouse. And then we'll be using SQL Server Management Studio. We'll be using cloud services, so we're not going to talk about, this isn't about security and cost best practices. It's your job to learn those if you want to use cloud services. We're merely just trying to connect Tableau to the data warehouse and then Azure Blob Store as well. There's 6 steps. 1, we're going to launch a SQL Data Warehouse. 2, we're going to connect that data warehouse via Management Studio. 3, we're going to create some tables in the Azure SQL Data Warehouse. We'll create one table native to the data warehouse, and then we'll also create an external table which is connected to a file in Azure Blob Store. Then we're going to connect Tableau Desktop Professional using the Microsoft SQL Server Connector, and then we're going to create a dashboard. And then finally, when we're going to delete our resource group in Azure so we stop in all resources and stop paying for everything. Step 1, we're going to launch a Azure SQL Data Warehouse. I'm using Edge. I am logged into Azure. I'm going to go to plus SQL Data Warehouse. Select SQL Data Warehouse. Create. Okay, I'm just going to call this DW database name. Why not? I'm going to call it DW resource group blank database. Okay, do not need 400 DWUs. Pin to dashboard. And I feel like I'm missing, where's the server? Okay, we need the server here. Sorry. I will need to create a new server because I don't have an existing server. So DW server name. So I'm just going to call this one. I'm going to create a login here. Super strong password. You'll want to remember this so you can log into the Azure Data Warehouse via SQL Server Management Studio and Tableau. So you want to remember these 2 credentials, and this is what you'll need for Tableau and SQL Server Management Studio. So all is good. I'm going to select, I'm going to pin to dashboard, and then create, and I'll start the stopwatch. Start the stopwatch here, and then I'll pause the video while we're waiting. Okay, that was about 4 minutes or so. So pretty quick to get a massively parallel processing MPP database, columnar store database up and running. Step 2, we're going to connect SQL Server Management Studio to the Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here. This is when it launched, it landed on the actual database here. I'm just going to click in the upper left-hand corner of the dashboard. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to find the resource group. So the important thing we're going to do here is open up the firewall. So remember I created that resource group called DW resource group. So I clicked on this icon, resource groups. I'm going to click on that resource group that I created. And then I'm going to go find the server right here. DW server name. This was all created at the same time when I launched the Azure SQL Data Warehouse. Click in here, and then firewall. So right now there's no access, so I'm going to click on the firewall. And then this has a nice feature I like here, so I'm just going to add my client IP, and then I'm going to save. So add client IP and save. Okay, now I should have access. So I'll go back to the resource group here. Select my resource. Actually, I'll just go to the dashboard here because I can go to my dashboard as well, and then you can see the actual SQL Data Warehouse. So I'm going to click on that. And then up here I have the server name, so I can click to copy. And then I'm going to open Management Studio. I have the latest and greatest copy of Management Studio as of May 2017. And then I'm going to copy that server name in there. Then those login credentials that I created at the beginning, including my super strong password, and then connect. And then there, I'm connected. And actually I noticed when I launched this, I launched it into West Europe, which I am not in West Europe. I'm in the Western United States. I'm in the Seattle area, so that's fine. No big deal. Also super important if you are not familiar with logging into Management Studio or SQL Server. So I'm going to go back and do this again. I'm going to go to Connect, Database Engine, paste it in here, and SQL Server authentication, right? Maybe yours might default to Windows, but you want SQL Server authentication. And then, yeah, just put the login and password. There we go. Step 3, we're going to create some tables in the Azure SQL Data Warehouse. We're going to create two types of tables. First, we're going to use Polybase and connect to Azure Blob Storage and set up an external table. And then we're going to create a native database table within the Azure SQL Data Warehouse. We have two types of tables. So first, I'm out on Bing here, and then you could Google whatever, but I typed in Azure SQL Data Warehouse Polybase Blob Storage. So what's cool about this is you can go to this website here, and then down here, Polybase from Blob Storage. So we have a set of steps here that we can follow. So this isn't a demo. We're not doing a demo here on how to use Polybase. We're doing a demo on how to connect Tableau to Azure Blob Storage using Polybase. So we're going to skip some steps here. So this says skip this step if loading Contoso public data. You don't need it. Secure access to the public data since it's already accessible to anyone. Yes, that's us. But if you were setting this up on your own, for your own files, your own data, your own production system, you'd have to go in and create a master key, and then you create a database scope credential specific to a database, okay? Different than a server scope credential, which allows SQL Server to go out to outside resources and access those resources. So remember, this database credential would have to go against an actual database. It's not at the server level. And then some other steps down here to create the data source specific to your blob container in your storage the container in your storage account right here. So how you do that. But we're going to skip that. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to go to create external data source, and I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to go to Management Studio. Okay, so what's important here is I need to drop down. I need to select a database. So this is the original database we created, DW database name. And then I'm going to highlight that, and then I'm going to click New Query. And then I'm going to copy what we had just got from the website there. Now, I think you have to highlight in the Azure SQL Server or the Azure SQL products, you have to highlight this. I don't think you can use the use database name. So you just highlight it, make sure it's up here, and then you're in that database. So I'm going to click Execute. it's going to create an external data source. So when I now go into here, I will see into this database, I will now see my data source that I just created. So it's in Azure. We are now accessing this container and this storage account. Okay, great. All right, so the next step here is we're going to specify an external file format, and this is what SQL Server or Polybase will use to interpret the file. So this specific file format right here is we're going to do a delimited text. But if you go out to the Microsoft site, you can see there's Hive ORC, Parquet files, lots of different options there to interpret your file. So you need to set this up and create some sort of a structure and a schema around this. So I'm going to copy this, go back into Management Studio, paste it, or maybe even just better, I'll just delete what's there, copy that, and then run that. So that completed successfully. Okay, and then next we're going to create a schema. So this is not a schema in a general database sense. This is a specific way to attach objects and group objects together. So I copied here. This schema will be named ASB, which is Azure Blob Storage. Okay, and then when we go to create the tables, those tables will be created under the name ASB. So I'll just pause it here while it's running. Okay, it says it took 23 seconds, which just seems a long time to do that in a normal SQL server. That's okay. And then going back to the next step, so we just created the schema. And then finally we have the external tables here. So this is a data warehouse, so we're going to be setting up dimensions and fact tables, and they have two here. So they have a dimension, a dim product set up, so we're going to create the external table and put in the columns and the data types and so forth. So there's dim product, and then down below here is a fact online sales table. So we're going for the star schema here. I'm going to copy this, copy it again. I'm just going to delete all this, paste it in here, and then execute. I'll pause it while it's going. Okay, that took 19 seconds. Took the schema like 28 seconds just to create the name. And good. So in this data warehouse called DW database name, we should now have tables. We should now have external tables. ASB dim product, ASB fact online sales. And these tables are actually not in SQL Server itself or Azure SQL Data Warehouse. They're actually external tables in Azure Blob Storage connected using Polybase. So in other words, if I wanted to do inserts, updates, or deletes, I'm not exactly sure. You can't think of it as a normal native table because it's a text file out on Blob Storage. All right, so the next step here, after creating an external table that is connected to Azure Blob Storage, we're just going to create a regular native table in SQL Server, Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So I'm going to go out to Management Studio here. And I've actually already created a script here. So we're going to create a table called shapes with a column called shape and then a column called color and then insert some data. One thing I found interesting in working at Azure SQL Data Warehouse, when I went to put data in the table, this doesn't work. So this particular where I add 3 sets of values, it works in regular SQL Server. I'm just not sure why it doesn't work in here. So quickly create the table. Okay, so if I refresh over here, I got a table called shapes now. And then I'm just going to actually highlight just before the comma. I'm going to insert that. Then I'll delete that. Do another insert. Execute. Okay. Then I'll delete that. And then I'll do a final insert. Okay, great. All right, so now we have a regular database table, and then we have some external tables in here. So why don't we just highlight on this dim product table, the external table. I'm going to right click, select 1,000 rows, and we'll be able to see the data in there. Okay, it's running here. Keep in mind I selected West Europe, so I should have selected West US, but that's okay. And then while that's running here, I'm going to go in and right click on shapes, select top 3 rows. That'll run as well. Okay, so there's shapes. This one's still executing. I'll pause real quick here. Okay, shapes came back in less than a second. Oh, I misspelled triangle. And then here's the dim product, the product dimension table right here, lots of data, which should allow us now to connect from Tableau and pull this data down and create a dashboard. Step 4, time to connect our data sources to Tableau. So the first thing to do here is to go into Tableau, go to a server. We're going to use the Microsoft SQL Server, and I've actually done a video on Microsoft SQL Server Connector, but Azure SQL Database and Azure SQL Data Warehouse, same thing. So I'm going to click on there. Okay, and so we need to go out and get the server name. So remember to start at the beginning here, I'm going to go to the dashboard, and then I have my Azure SQL Data Warehouse here, and then I can go out and copy the server name right here. Otherwise, I can always go out to my resource groups right here, go select that resource group I created at the beginning, and then you'll see both the server name and the data warehouse. So I'll just pick the data warehouse here. Again, in the upper right hand corner, it will have the server name. So I'm going to copy that, go out to Tableau, paste that in there. I'm not going to just leave that blank there. And then my login credentials when I created the Azure SQL Data Warehouse. Sign in. And then logged in. So select database, DW database name. So we're connected. Time to create a dashboard now that we're connected. So I'm in Tableau here. You can see here's my dimension and fact table right here. So I'm going to drag the dimension over here. I'm going to drag the fact table over here. And then you can see here that these are joined. They did an automatic join, but let's check the join here. I don't think the ETF load ID. So it's a dimension. So I think we want the product key. And then on the fact table, we want the product key as well. So that's a more correct. And then now that we got that, we can go to the worksheet here. We have all of these things out here. So why not just do class name? See what comes up here. Pause it for a second. This is actually going out and querying, going out to Blob Store and querying and bringing it back. And this is kind of where it gets a little dangerous once you start tapping in the databases. You don't know what you're doing. You could really just destroy the network and the database if you're not careful. So I'll pause it just for a second here. Okay, that took a minute. I think that was a disastrous choice on my part to pick Western Europe when I'm in Seattle, Washington. So drag brand name in there now and see what happens. Pause it again. Okay, that took about a minute and a half. Yeah, that was a disastrous choice there to pick Western Europe because I think the data is in the Western US. It's the Azure SQL Data Warehouse is in Western Europe. Okay, one last thing that we're going to put in here. We need to put a fact in here, sales amount. Okay, put a fact. Pause it again. Okay, that took almost 2 minutes. So I think we're done there. I don't know, why not just put the color name in, put the, sorry, the class name as a color, just to do that a little bit. Okay, so there, I'll skip the shape here, putting the shapes in here. There's a video on Microsoft SQL Server, but that's just a native table. That's a really easy. So we can see idea here. So this is our Azure SQL Data Warehouse. This took way too long. There's a lot of architecture and query optimization things. It really should just be drag and drop and super quick. But the point of this video is really just to show how in Tableau we can connect to Azure SQL Data Warehouse, which normally would be super fast. And then with an Azure Data Warehouse, you got your normal tables, plus using Polybase you can get access to Azure Blob Storage files, which can exist from, say, a Hadoop cluster output. So we are connected. Step 6, we just created our Tableau dashboard. Now we're done. So we're going to go back into Azure, click on the upper left, go to my dashboard. Okay, I don't want to just delete this by itself. This is where resource groups are great. So I go to my resource group icon and click on that, and then I will go find the resource group that I have here. Okay, and you'll see all the resources down in here. And then the great thing is I can select delete the resource group, and I like this better than I think AWS, which I think it's a little harder to do all this in one fell swoop sometimes. So it's going to delete the server and the database. Delete. And there, now you can see it deleting, and we're done. Stop using the resources, stop paying for the resources. So that concludes the demo on how to connect Tableau to an Azure SQL Data Warehouse and Azure Blob Storage. As I said, I made a bad design choice. The source data for Blob Storage was in US West, and I accidentally selected West Europe for the data warehouse. So I wasn't showcasing the speedy fastness of Azure SQL Data Warehouse. I did a poor job of doing that, but the point of this was to show you how to connect it all together, and then there's obviously you could optimize the architecture and the queries and the database itself. Again, Matt Philippi. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, CPA and Business Intelligence, YouTube. Please subscribe if you find this interesting and want to learn more. And then I'm also on Tableau Public. Thank you.